Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Outside the Box. And I'm so glad we're doing this, Matt. We've been talking about it. We're finally doing it. And guys, for the people listening and watching who don't know, I'm with Matt Dowd. He's from Identity Exchange. He's not only an identity coach, but he also does business development for the company Identity Exchange. Works with Jamie and Donna Winship. Matt, how's it going, man?
Going great, Ben. I love it. Yeah, it's great to be here.
I feel like, you and I've had a lot of conversations, and every time we talk, I feel like we both have massive regret that we didn't record it. And we're like, today we're not letting that happen. We're going to have this conversation. We're going to record it so others can hear it and kind of gain something from it, the way I've gained tons of value from my conversations with you, as well as everybody at Identity Exchange, Jamie and Donna included. And first of all, tell people a little bit about who you are. Let's go through that. Who's Matt Dowd?
Yeah, wow, okay. It's funny, I wasn't even thinking about that aspect of this. Okay, well, so yeah, like you said, I mean, work-wise, I work with Jamie and Donna quite a bit now with Identity Exchange because I've been doing coaching with them for a few years, and then recently jumped into the business development side because the company is really growing and needing to scale, and needing to build some systems. And that's my background work-wise has been with like startup companies. I have another company that I helped a buddy start back in Oregon, where I'm from, in the software space, and so my role was always trying to build out the operations of the business so he could focus on the product itself, and getting it to customers. And I found that I really enjoy that process, of taking a visionary, somebody who's got a big idea and knows how to make it work, but needs help with sort of the back end of the business. It's a little bit front end, a little bit back end, but it's like building the foundation, right? The part that you don't see, like the skyscraper, there's months and months of just a big hole in the ground. And then you drive by one day and it's 20 stories high. You know what I mean? It's like how you got to have that foundation in place though, for it to grow big and tall and be strong. So that's the type of work that I do, I guess, in general, in a nutshell. I live in Kansas City on the Kansas side of the metro, if anybody knows the area. And I have just a beautiful little family going, man.
That's
my
awesome.
Wife's Steph, and then we have 3 kids. Nash, who's 10, Keaton is 2.5, and a total Spitfire, And then we have a baby girl, Esri, who just turned 6 months old a couple days ago.
What's the baby girl's name?
Esri.
Esri.
It's like the feminine of Ezra.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, and she is super sweet. She's super sweet. And she's pretty laid back because her brothers are super high energy, so she kind of just takes it all in,
She balances everybody out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But she's finding her own voice too, so it's pretty cool to watch.
That's amazing. I didn't even plan for this, but based on your background and the work that you do with identity, it's a perfect segue into the topic that we wanted to really talk with you about, which is energy. And it kind of feels like this is an operational type thing. It's like, where do you get your energy from? Is it coming from, a sustainable source? And also, you can lose energy, you can have energy be taken away from you. And so let me ask you, Matt, like, what do you think about energy? How do you think about it? And what are some sustainable places that you yourself get energy from?
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's funny because when you first posed that topic, I had sort of a negative reaction to it. I was like, energy. I was like, I don't know. What am I going to say about energy? I'm not like a science person, and I've got all these other things that I feel like I could talk about. And this one, I don't know. But then I was sitting with it and ideas started coming to my mind and it started to make a little more sense. I feel like energy is a resource that we tend to consider scarce. Okay, kind of like money and time and love, and to name a few. And so like working with Jamie Winship, like we both do, just learning from him some stuff, has been this idea that maybe those things aren't actually scarce and limited. Maybe we've just been thinking about it wrong or understanding it incorrectly. And so one of the things that drew me into, him and this whole, like working with him, or just, learning from him and this whole way of looking at things, was the better, or like the transition, or the clarification of what's going on in scripture. Like, the way that he makes it just relatable.
Yeah.
But not just in a religious way, like not just a moral way, like in a real biological way, like human way. Like, this is just how the world works. And this is how scripture is describing how the world works. So when I started thinking about energy, the Isaiah verse came to mind. Those who wait on the Lord will renew their strength. They will rise up with wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary, and they will walk and not grow faint. Okay. And so I was like, learning to take, I feel like we could do a whole podcast series on this. Like, which things in the Bible should we take literally and which ones should we take figuratively?
Oh, man.
Maybe we talked about this before, right? But like, what if we took that passage literally instead of just making a poster on the wall to make me feel good? It's like, okay, what is he saying? Like, what is God saying about your source of energy? Physically, literally.
That it comes from him,
Yeah,
and to wait on it.
Yeah, so I Googled, like, how do you wait on the Lord? Like, what is that?
Yeah, exactly. What is that?
In Hebrew, in the scriptures, I mean, this is a cursory, look at it. Is that my computer making those noises?
I believe so.
I don't know why it's doing that. And I don't know how to turn it off. It says, okay, so in the scriptures, the word wait means to hope, anticipate, and trust. So it's like this active, it's sort of not so passive, it's just sitting around and waiting and doing nothing.
Can you say that again, the non-passive version?
Well, yeah, to hope, to anticipate, and to trust. Those are active words.
Yeah.
It's not passively just waiting, like just sitting around,
Yeah.
It's like, where are you placing your hope, anticipation, and trust? So I think what we end up doing is we place our trust, like, deep down. Like, what do we actually trust in? Or if we're putting it in things that are not sustainable, like money, like we were just talking about the banks and all this, the craziness that's going on. Like, maybe he's saying that if you put your trust in finances and money and all that kind of stuff, then you're putting it in a system that's just based on a false hope, because our money is just based on our agreement with each other that money has value. There's nothing actually real there, right? You see where I'm going with that? And so
so it's faith, hope, and trust. It's anticipation, which is hope. So you're anticipating or expecting something to happen. So I'm hearing that waiting is active in this scenario, and we're taking that well, we're not taking it literally, but we're going to do probably a whole podcast series on what we should take literally and what we shouldn't. So how do we practice that when you get, so like you mentioned the banks, but we also have like people around us who don't have the same mentality that you and I may have, that take energy away. Like, how do you practice this in kind of like a modern world?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question, right? It's kind of like the question. How do you put it into practice? In thinking about that, the first thing that comes to mind is that we have to move beyond our rational, conscious mind and access the intuitive mind, our imagination, and the source, again, like what's going on in our spirit, essentially. It's like, what if that was the source of all of these things? And when you read scripture, you look at what Jesus says and what's kind of all throughout it, it's like it really gets at a lot of this what's going on inside, even deep down, not just my thoughts, but like deeper than that, like what's powering my thoughts and my perspective on everything.
Yeah, I love that. And kind of the way I'm taking that is, yes, you're in the modern world, but really it's all an internal thing. It's all an internal game. And when you go up into the intuitive
Mm-hmm.
and like you're in control of basically your energy source and you're not letting things outside of that affect it. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Well, I think so. I mean, partly it's just like another Isaiah passage comes to mind, like he will keep in perfect peace those whose mind is fixed on him, right? God is saying that about himself. And mind, there the word really can be translated imagination. So you think about how like what's a practical scenario? Like think about Thanksgiving dinner, and you're going to be with your in-laws and you have a tenuous relationship with them, let's just say, right? There's some kind of situation that you're going to enter where you feel kind of a dread or like an anticipation, like a negative anticipation, and don't we all sort of tend to just play out that scenario in our mind based on our past experience?
Yep.
Projecting it into the future, being like, it's just going to be this other run around and we're going to get in an argument about politics or whatever, or just like the way our family works and it's all going to break down and I can just all see it already happening, and then you walk into the situation and then ta-da, it actually happens. It's like we live out these scenarios in our imaginations first, and we tend to give a lot of credence to the view or the vision of it that is negative, and like that takes energy away, that takes joy away, right? And puts us in a worse mind space. And we tend to just believe it pretty easily that that's how it's going to be. If we even go so far as to think consciously about it, it's just like, that's just the way it is, or money. Like we're subject to money because that's just the way it is. Like I can't make any decisions, outside of what my finances will allow. That's the reality that we're sort of confined to if we haven't taken the time or been fortunate enough to get exposed to this idea of how do you see through that? Like, how do you see beyond it? So when you're talking about other people, I think it's really, really important to seek out people or find people who are intent on not being confined to that. And does that make sense? Like who are interested in exploring what it means to go beyond just what our physical eyes show us and what our rational mind can comprehend and all this kind of stuff that we seem to be pretty dependent on.
Yeah, it seems like I don't know. We grew up thinking about imagination as like a fictional thing, like
Yeah.
you do that to escape, and but I'm starting to learn, like, I feel like imagination is as much a part of reality as it is fiction. I feel like you almost have to exercise that at all times. Has that,
Yeah.
like, through this whole identity process, has your ideas on imagination changed?
Oh, huge. Yeah. Massively. I mean, it's exactly what you're just saying, right? It was just something to grow out of, and now we're going to apply our rational mind, which is very important. Like you don't want to swing so far the other end of the spectrum that you just eliminate rational thought. Like that's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about sort of the sequencing or the order or the source, right? Like what's the source? I think a really damaging thing is I think, therefore I am.
Ooh.
That is, yeah. like Rodin or whatever, right?
So this is damaging. I think, therefore I am.
Yeah. That's
But
become
all,
like a catchphrase of Western culture, intellectual, right? Like my
yep.
being is grounded in my rational mind, my
Ooh,
ability
okay.
to think and rationalize, and my intellect. Then you think about, like, look at the world. When I think about these things, then I just look at the world and see, how does this play out? You know, and I feel like it does. It's like we're so convinced that we can just figure everything out, scientifically prove it all. You know what I mean? It's like it's all based in that.
So what's a better way of thinking as an alternative to I think, therefore I am? Because I also can see the positive in that, you know, um, it kind of goes back to the note, like fake it until you make it. But like, I feel like, it does take you into your imagination if you look at it the right way. But if
Well,
you're
that's
only in the
true.
rational mind,
Well, that's right. So I guess if you're thinking about contemplation, you know, uh,
yeah,
and when I think even now when I think of contemplative or contemplation, might get this image of like thinking hard about something.
yeah,
And that's not what contemplation is about, really. It's more like engaging your intuitive mind and observing it or interacting with it, and like letting your conscious mind and subconscious actually connect, because you do have to take what you imagine and what you see in that space and bring it into the world, right? Like bring it into reality. I always think about like Walt Disney
yeah,
for some reason, and the
yeah,
story of him just like looking at this empty farmland in Anaheim, California, and saying, this people are going to come from all over the world to this place because it's going to be the happiest place on earth. And can you imagine what people would have said if they're standing out there with him? Like, you're crazy. What are you talking about?
right.
But it existed in his imagination before it existed physically in the world. It had to exist somewhere before it existed in where we can go see it,
Totally.
you know?
It, so I'm hearing that the intuitive mind as a source of energy. And for those who haven't watched it, we've done 2 episodes on the intuitive mind with Jamie. We'll link them in the description below. Talks a lot about what Matt here is talking about, which is the relationship between the intuitive mind and the rational, and how you kind of go back and forth. And what Matt's saying is, in the intuitive mind of Walt Disney, he had this vision, and then he goes down to the rational to kind of, make it happen, for
Yeah, yeah.
lack of a better term.
Right.
Um,
At
one
least
one
to have cast it out into the world, and then obviously it took thousands and however many people it took to
Yeah.
actually execute the vision.
Do you think of like coming down to the rational as like a task list, a to-do list? Like, is that the way you think about it? Because when I think about the relationship between the intuitive and the rational, I think about going into your imagination, seeing what comes in your imagination, and then going down to the rational and, okay, in order to do that, we need this, this, and this, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it for sure. Yeah. I think that if that makes you feel good, then yeah. If it makes you feel like, oh, well, now it's just down to like a super mundane thing, then I wouldn't want to think of it that, like, not reduce it that far down to just that, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
Because what should happen as it relates to energy, is that when you have a vision, I keep going to different scriptures here, like I think it's Proverbs, where there is no vision, the people perish. Right. So the converse of that, where there's a vision, there's life.
mm,
Right. So I think about, when I have something that I'm excited about, I wake up early in the morning without an alarm. I just wake up and I'm like thinking about it already, ready to go,
yeah,
and like getting new ideas. And then you got to work the ideas out. You have to evaluate them and see which ones make sense, which ones can be executed and practically, which ones are right for right now, which ones maybe for later. There's this whole process to go through, and I think the rational is the mechanism to process it all.
oh, it's like a processor.
Yeah, and end up with something of value. Otherwise, otherwise you just have a dream, and that's
It,
it.
right. It doesn't do any good if it's
Yeah,
just in your head.
yeah, yeah. And like a simple example is, people that we call creatives, who can paint or sculpt or write music or make films or all that kind of stuff. Um, Creatives, we give them that, dubbed that title or whatever, but I think everybody is creative in a certain way. Like you can have an accountant who's really creative with spreadsheets and the way
Right.
they look at numbers and stuff. It's just so finding your creativity starts with finding your identity. Who are you? How have you been wired? What types of things light you up
Mm.
and produce energy? And I think you could get into the science of it. I can't talk about the science of it. Like I've only could reiterate what I've read or heard, but the science aspect of it is not my area of like real strength or understanding. But I know that there's overlapping layers between looking at the neuroscience and looking at the
Mm.
spirituality of it, like what Jesus says, what the Bible says, and then looking just like in my own life, I guess, and how it plays out practically. Like I was saying, like the times in my life where it's hard to get out of bed versus the times where I pop up out of bed ready to go. They're like, that's energy.
And is that something we say a lot at performance medicine is like follow your energy, and we talk a lot about it in relation to like food, and what foods make you feel good versus what foods do you feel like you need to take a nap after you eat them.
Right.
Um, is that kind of is it along the same? Is it the same concept? Like, um, if you're
Yeah.
feeling energized, kind of follow that. That's a sign that you're, kind of in your sweet spot.
Yeah.
But quick thoughts on that, and then I want to kind of go to the alternative here, which I know people can relate to.
Yeah. Well, I would say just, yeah, my initial reaction to that is definitely yes. Um, I think people can tell, you can tell a difference when you're feeling energized and excited about something and like want to move towards it, then it's resonating in something that's true about you.
Mm,
Um, yeah, I don't know exactly what else to say about that. I mean, I think there can be false ways that happens. I always found that when I would go down, like I bounced around careers for a while, kind of early on, or like different jobs and stuff, because I was always looking for the thing that would energize me and feel like it fit well. And I would have these, 6 months of just really pumped up and have some success. And then after the success or like the initial success, I would be kind of either burnt out or just like, well, I did that, checked it off, and it wasn't sustainable. And I think that was where I was trying to apply it in the wrong venue. Like I was doing things that weren't really the right fit, or I wasn't really operating in my true identity in those things, and so it was short lived.
so was that more of just a sign to you, or because I feel like it's hard to know until you feel it, you know? Like, how would you do that any differently now?
Well, I mean, yes and no. Going forward, I wouldn't want to do it
Right.
that way but I did learn a lot from it. Number one, I gained a breadth of experience, just like super practically. I gained a breadth of experience in different things that help me a lot now in what I do. Actually, it's like good to have a little bit of knowledge about a lot of different things. So I look back at it and like, oh, I'm glad I kind of moved around a lot because I learned a lot of things at the level that I needed them. I didn't need a
Mhm.
lot of depth. I needed breadth for really what fits me and for what I do. Um, I also um, think it was part of the process. Like I had to come to a point where I got frustrated with how I was approaching it to get to the point where I was willing to surrender it, and I
Right.
not realized that I couldn't do it all on my own and I needed to get some outside help.
Mm.
Um, and then surrendering to that, like really surrendering to God and having, an experiences that spoke to my inner person, not just my circumstances and all that kind of stuff. That was a massive shift. And what shifted was this, like where I was sourcing everything, right? Like I was looking to these external things, relationships and career and, status or whatever you want to call it, my perception of all those things. Like I needed them to be achieving what I hoped they would be or what I thought looked like success in order for me to have a chance of feeling like it was working. So it was fleeting, because when it looked good, then I felt good. And when it didn't look good, then I didn't feel good. So I was up and down all the time. The switch, like understanding how to access this intuitive part of myself, and a different source, was that I realized that what I needed was already always available. I could tap into it. It was already within me, and with me and within me. And then I could get what I needed from that and then take it into any situation.
Yeah.
So then I wasn't looking for validation or fulfillment or energy or anything like that from what I was doing. I was bringing it with me into what I'm doing. So I never want to go back. I never want to go back to the other way of doing it.
Right. Right. When you say tap into it, are you saying tap into the intuitive or tapping into identity or both? Because I'm fascinated with this idea of like bringing this with you wherever you go. So you're less dependent on like finding the perfect job, having, perfect relationships, perfect friends, that sort of thing. Like bringing this thing into any scenario, and it feels protective to me, like in a good way.
Well, yeah, because now your dependency, like that, right back to what we were talking about before, like what do I hope and trust in? Where's my anticipation? So it's based in God, like in this universal presence of love, and energy and light and all these things that we need that sustain life. And that has been made known to us and available to us in a personal way through Jesus. He is like a personal, like talk about what should you take literally? Like take him literally. He's a real person that you can interact with, right? So, but it doesn't usually show up at your door and come in and have coffee. It's like this takes place in your intuitive mind, in your spirit. But we can behold him. We can learn to quiet our minds and listen to him, and engage with it that way. And we get what we need, right? We're able to exchange our own perspective, which is limited and finite and dependent on all these scarce resources and stuff. We can exchange that for an unlimited perspective and the unlimited source of, time and love and energy and everything that we need. And I don't know if this sounds like just way out there or whatever, but I mean, it's super practical. It's like, just sit for 15 minutes and maybe like learn the right questions to ask or whatever. Just sit there and be like, okay, God, if you're real, then what do you want me to know? Like if you're starting from total scratch, you're going to have to test it out. You're just going to have to try it out. Like, help me quiet my mind and see in my imagination what you want me to see. And you might have to start by unloading unhelpful things. Like, what do I believe, or what images is my mind conditioned to produce that keep me stuck in an unhelpful system? That keep me stuck in a false belief that produces negative outcomes for me, right? Like, what needs to be removed? See what comes to mind. It works pretty well.
That is interesting. Yeah, how practical it is.
Like an actual process. Okay, so I have these beliefs. I was not aware of them, but now I'm becoming aware of them. Okay, I want to release those. Okay, if I could encounter love like this, or this perfect presence that wanted the best for me and wanted to help me remove things that hurt me and give me things that help me, like what would it remove and what would it give me back? And you just sit in that process for a little bit, see what comes to mind, see how it makes you feel. Like it should energize you, right? It should give you joy and peace. Like you should experience those things. Your outer circumstances don't have to change one bit. They won't usually, right? The change is happening inside of you. And then you gain something that you can then turn around and go take into your circumstance, whatever it is, tough situation at work, tough situation in your family, financially, health-wise, like whatever. You come in better equipped, with joy and hope and anticipation and this positive energy. And you bring it in.
Joy, hope, anticipation, that's all energy, right?
Sure. I don't know.
I kind of want to go to the alternative here and get your thoughts on, like, I know a lot of very successful people who become successful because of a chip on their shoulder or anger. I'll show you, I'm better than, you or this person. This person slighted me 10 years ago. Right. And I've been like sourcing from that every single day since. And I've talked a little bit with Jamie about it. It seems kind of practical to me. It's there,
It works.
Yeah, it's like, you're kind of turning a negative into a positive. I think. So when I say those things, what kind of comes to mind for you?
I mean, I think of some athlete friends that I have, it absolutely works to a degree.
Yep.
The question, Jamie's favorite question is, well, do you have joy? And I think pretty universally when you talk to someone who's been in that mode, and he's done work with professional athletes, and I know some myself, and it's like they all get to a point where the joy is gone. They're not 10 years old on the playground playing football anymore. Now it's like, I gotta perform so I can get the next contract, so I can pay all these bills, and like all pressure.
Yeah,
it's all pressure, and it's all based in this fear of what is going to go wrong, or how their image is not going to hold up, or just the fact that they don't know. I mean, I look at Tom Brady and I'm like, there's a guy who doesn't know his identity outside of football, otherwise he would have retired 6 years ago. That's just my cursory take on it or whatever, but it's like so it becomes like your biggest positive becomes this huge negative burden.
Right.
Or I thought about Tiger Woods a long time ago, like, just go away from golf, man. Just leave it. Like, why? What else do you have left to prove, And so you feel for people like that, because it's like, we call it a false positive. They've gotten all this reinforcement in their lives that their value comes from their ability to produce and how good they are at things. And they are good, redemptive things. It's like being a great athlete or whatever. Being super successful is good. But when it becomes your identity and then you're no longer able to sustain it, then where are you? What are you left with? You're in really bad shape at that point, internally at least, right? Like so what was the question? I don't know if I'm answering the question correctly. It's like,
I'm thinking about like sources of energy and sources of like, drivers, motivators.
Yeah. So the chip on the shoulder, right? Like what drove me to get here? And I think when you get with people who have kind of been driven by that, they don't want to give it up, right? They don't want to get healthy and feel at peace, because then what's going to drive them forward? And so something I tend to say is like, people don't want to change because a false identity is better than no identity.
Ooh, yeah.
Right?
Makes a ton of sense.
I'm afraid of, like, I don't know who I am without football or without whatever this has made me successful. And so it's just a void when I look at that option. It's empty, and that's scarier than anything. I'd rather just kind of put up with this, because there is some good that comes from it, and I know what it is, and provides a good lifestyle or whatever, even though you might be dying inside, totally burnt out, or doing things out of obligation. Obligation is it's like the number one thing I want to avoid in my life. I do not want to do anything out of obligation. And I mean, like changing diapers, which I am in that phase right now, And it's been amazing to feel like I'm not doing this out of some sense of drudgery and obligation. There's like some joy in there, actually. It's pretty interesting.
So how did you, because I feel like that's super practical. There's like, there's a lot of, say you're a new parent, you're having to do things that, on the outside looking in isn't glamorous, and
Right.
how do you find joy in all those things, and not see it as, because I also think of like obligation, responsibility, stuff like that, like really good, like it's good to have responsibility. It's good to, meet your obligations. Can you kind of talk me through that? Because what I'm kind of hearing you say is like you can find the joy in it not feel obligatory.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just like not doing things I don't want to do. It's more like the change of perspective on what it is that's happening and what I am doing. So like with the diaper example, for example, I just found myself having this cool connection, with my kids, and like serving them in a way that they need, and it's a humbling thing, but it felt like there was something cool happening with that. It's not a big, huge deal. It just, like, it helped me not see it as like, oh, I'm changing the 795th diaper. You know what I mean? It's like, and so it's just like a little subtle shift is all.
Can you turn like lots of like kind of, very normal responsibilities like changing a diaper, normal obligations. Can you kind of, is it easy to shift into I'm serving, and then you get joy from that?
Well, if you trace it back, I mean, it's funny. I don't know if this is correct or not, but this is just kind of the way I think about it, is that if you really start to dig, and get back to the core of what's going on, there's something to like, okay, I'm taking out the trash. It means that I'm a person who's a trash taker outer. And like, where's the status in that? It's just like, I'd rather be a professional baseball player, And so it's like, if my identity is coming from what I'm doing, then when I'm taking out trash, it's like, I don't have a very high view of myself. And I don't think the world has a very high view of that. So I tend to believe that this is just kind of a lowly, and I don't like it because it doesn't make me feel good about me,
Yeah.
Whereas if I already have my identity secure from the source, right, and I know who I am, then turn around and like I can do anything, as long as it's a redemptive thing. I mean, let's not go, illegal, immoral, not that kind of stuff. But anything that I do, it's like that verse that says, work unto the Lord. Like whenever you work and whatever you do, do it unto the Lord. And that can actually feel like obligation. Like, oh, I have to be happy about this, even though I don't like it. Well, it's because you're trying to apply a principle externally to a thing that has not been transformed internally. So it's all about,
explain that.
It's all about the internal transformation, like this perspective shift. Like, I'm not getting my identity from taking out the garbage, because that's not where identity comes from. And I'm no longer deceived to think that it is.
Well, and the other thing is like, you're not getting your identity from, changing a diaper, because I'm sure people can, because you feel needed. And you know what I mean? Like there's identity that could come from that if you're not, doing it from the right source, from a place of service. Is that
right? Yeah,
is that too extreme?
Well, no, I think you can go down that whole line of thinking too. Is like, I need to feel needed. That's where my identity comes from, is like helping other people. So I compulsively always have to be doing something that makes me feel valuable, that gets me like recognition from other people or whatever. Because again, I'm not comfortable enough just to kind of rest It's always a balance. Like people tend to go, off the rails in different directions, and then it plays out differently. So it's not like there's one right or wrong thing. It just depends on how it's worked for you, if that makes sense. Some people
Yeah.
need to help less. They just need to like take care of themselves or chill out. Some people need to get off their butt and help more. Like, let's contribute here a little bit. Is your tendency to achieve or to what's the other one? When we're looking for approval, we have tendency to either go out and achieve, or we have a tendency to go out and can't think of the other word, but it's like avoidance, basically. Just go out and have fun.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It's either I go work hard or I go play hard and avoid, and that's kind of two main ways that plays out. That's a little bit of I'm not thinking of that totally correctly, but we can get back to that sometime if you want.
No, it's really interesting, and it's funny how subtle all this is. There's like a fine line, and I think, over the course of a day, you're gonna kind of be teetering, and you kind of bring yourself back in, like
Yeah.
what am I sourcing from here?
Yeah. The other thing I want to say real quick about obligation is I've seen, so you got the false positives, right? Like the successful athlete or business person or whatever who, has kind of been powered by their success. And maybe like behind that was powered by some initial setback that motivated them to prove that wasn't going to define them,
Right.
And so you have the good and the bad that comes with that. But then you have the other side of it where you have people who have done things they hate for years out of obligation. And all the while they've had this dream of what they could be that they've just like squashed and buried it. Like I was talking to a pastor the other day who's completely burnt out, like doesn't even know if he believes in the system that he's trying to uphold right now, and it's like there's all these issues from his past, like just his childhood stuff, just like relationships with his dad, and from there on out, right? Just all these things that have shaped his view of everything, and he's been trying to do the right thing, but he's got dreams of being like an entrepreneur and being in business, and he's afraid to venture over there for all these reasons, right? Like, number one, he's kind of got security, he's been successful where he's at, but also it's like, would leaving ministry and going into the business world be the right thing to do? There's all these just weird, these beliefs that have kind of got him wrapped up. And you feel for the guy because you can tell he's like, even talking about that other possibility, like you can hear the energy, the life come into his voice, but then it's always like, yeah, but I can't do that right now, and then it's like,
or it's not the right thing to do.
Yeah, there's some reason why that's not, he can't go do that, even though he would be a whole different person. Like I can just imagine that, like at home, and interacting with his wife and kids and stuff, it would just be a whole different thing if he was able to go step into that, pathway that's been in his mind for so long. But he's just kind of like doing, like staying the course of duty and obligation, but it's resignation at this point, to my situation. And you see that a lot too, and that's really sad. I hate to see that.
It's interesting, like everyone knows like kind of what lights you up, and or a lot of people may not even seek it out, but I mean that's a clear signal, because you're going to be a better partner, husband, wife, whatever, parent, when you live that way. And it just seems like a different way of living.
Yeah, I would say it's totally different. Yeah. It's almost like exactly opposite.
Let me ask you, how do you interact with like people that might be negative? People who don't see the world the way that you do. And, because part of this journey, energy, life, identity, coming from, peace and joy, people around us might not be the same way or in that same place yet. How have you done it in your own life? Do you avoid them?
Probably.
Like,
Well, you can't always avoid them, and I think the short answer would be like overwhelmingly very poorly when you say how have I interacted with them. But I'm getting better
okay.
because so I have this identity. We talk about identity, and in the context that we're in, we believe that like God reveals specific things about our identity to us, and so he calls me a tiller of the soil,
Mm.
which is not a phrase that I ever would have thought of or invented, but it just came to me when
Yeah.
I was asking him about it, and that's what he said, and it means like I have a really big interest in truth seeking and finding the core, like the root of what's causing something to happen. I'm always interested in getting beneath the surface. So like breaking up, crusty soil, to use that analogy, to allow air and light and water and everything to get in there, which allows for growth. But it's about truth. Truth is the key, right? Are we operating in truth? Are we operating in some false paradigm or some false mindset or wrong thinking, wrong belief, whatever? So whenever I see that, I automatically like become a heat-seeking missile to like seek out and destroy the lie. But it's not always helpful, and it's not always welcome, And so I've had to learn how to temper it and how to listen for like the leading, like for God to lead. Like, is this a time? And it's just a sense, really. It's like, is this person ready? Do they want it? Like, are they stuck, but they want to get unstuck, or are they just stuck? And there's a big difference, right? So I try now to be aware of that, and it's still not perfect by any means, but I try to be aware if I'm talking with someone who is like hungry to get unstuck and they're inviting in like this digging, or if they're just not ready for it for whatever reason. And if they're not ready for it, they're not ready for it. Like anything I could do is just going to make it worse or make them not like me or make them feel bad about themselves or whatever, And so it's not productive to go in after it at that point. So it's a case by case basis, I guess,
So it's more of like an understanding of who you are, and you're not letting negative people bring you down because they're either in a place where they need somebody like you or they're not. And so like you're able to kind of be like, okay, I'll be there for them in any way I can, but you're not letting that kind of affect you or take you out of your identity.
Well, ideally, yeah. I mean, and when I'm coaching somebody who I, don't really know and they live somewhere else and like their life doesn't really affect me, then it's very easy,
Well, sure.
Either helping them or not. But if it's somebody who's actually in my life and then I start to perceive things that I think are wrong or, keeping them stuck, then it can start to affect me. It triggers me, and then I can easily go into my own old responses to that, which is to criticize it and, fight against it and argue and debate, try to change them or change the scenario, and that's almost always detrimental. Occasionally, maybe occasionally it works, but really it's not a good way to go about things. So then what I've learned and am learning to do is when that happens and it's actually something that I see is hurting them, but it's also affecting me somehow, then I got to go address it internally first. Like I got to go back to the drawing board and be like, what is it that's being triggered in me that's causing me to feel this way, and try to work through that and get back to health, wholeness, peace, within myself. And then look again at the situation and say, now, what does it need? Is there something productive I can do here that's loving, redemptive, or not? Or do I just need to leave it alone? That's probably more often than not, the answer is that just leave it alone, or just care for the person, but don't necessarily try to solve the problem.
Yeah, it's so interesting, and I think you beautifully answered my question there, and I've heard you talk a little bit around that concept of, you know, when someone else's behavior or viewpoint or whatever is affecting you, triggering you in some way,
Yeah.
it's less about them and more about what's happening internally with you, because and then you start to feel in control. It's like, okay, I don't need to like protect myself from this person, or I need to avoid, those people over there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's almost like you can use it as a way of like, well, what's happening inside of me that I need to, get to the truth of,
Yeah.
is that kind of what it is? Get to the truth of it, or what lie am I telling myself?
Yeah. Yeah. Same thing. Yeah. Right.
Both.
There's a lie I believe that's causing me to be afraid of something. Can I identify what the actual fear is? Like, what am I afraid of with, like that I need to defend or fight against, and the truth, what does the truth do? It sets you free. And I want freedom from this feeling of angst, this need to fight, you know, this feeling like I'm being offended is kind of the word, like,
Or like these people are bringing me down.
my, yeah, it's bringing me down some way or another, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah. This is, so to tie it back to another like biblical principle, this is what I've come to understand as the straight and narrow way that few find. Everybody, like, we all tend to want to fix the problems that we see out in the world, but we tend not to want to address the core issues inside of us. It's like, I'm classic at this, like I can identify all these problems. Excuse me. Like, clearly the issues are all out here. I can just tell you exactly what's wrong everywhere with everybody. It's simple. They would,
I can see it.
yeah. But look around at the world and all of the finger pointing and fighting and stuff that's going on. It's like people don't want to look inside and see what, it's painful in there, like this is usually coming out of wounds, trauma, pain, brokenness, bad things that have accumulated in my life that I've experienced that, that's when we're talking about the root cause, like that's what's going on. So addressing it would be helpful, but it's not fun. Usually.
Addressing it internally.
Yeah.
Okay.
Looking inside, opening up, like examining what's going on in there, like what's causing me to feel afraid, what's causing me to feel anxious, angry, defensive, all those things, that make me, any kind of those negative experiences that we have, right? Like, what's the cause of it in me? Does that make sense? Like, am I making sense with that?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And to me, it's not, it doesn't seem like daunting or difficult. To me, it seems relieving, because, again, I'm not like, no one can take away from me, like I think, a lot of us who, are going, we're learning who we are, we're living, with peace and joy. And we're like, all the people who aren't, like, stay away. I don't want anyone to take me out of this place.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And, and this just feels like we're not vulnerable to that, or you don't have to be. And
yeah.
And you don't have to, again, I guess you could go into self-protective mode, even when you're trying to stay in your identity and staying in peace and joy. And does that ring a bell? Does that make any sense?
Oh yeah, it's very it's very subtle, because there's there's always another layer. Like, we're still human, so we're always going to have things that we kind of struggle with or deal with. I don't think on this side of life or whatever we're going to get to the point where we're completely well, and
Right.
don't have anything that would ever trigger us or cause us to feel, afraid or threatened or anything like that. It hopefully gets to where those things are deeper and deeper, or like more, it takes more to trigger us, right?
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
oh, my coffee wasn't hot enough and I just fly off the handle. It's like, okay, that's a pretty shallow trigger. you know Hopefully we can get help, get healing from those things, and to the point where it takes more and more to get us out of whack. So yeah, I think it's entirely possible to where you see people who it's very hard to rile them up because they're just so practiced. It's the discipline, the discipline word is not like making myself into something. It's willingness to engage in the process that will transform me.
Mm.
That's the discipline.
Can you say that one more time?
The discipline is not like making myself. That's obligation again, right? And this idea that like religion does it unwittingly, inadvertently to people to make us feel like we're not living up to the standard, and now it's on me to go fix it and figure it out. And so then we try to become disciplined so that we like check all the boxes and don't miss anything, and don't stray outside of, like, don't do the wrong thing, make sure to do the right things. And it's like, but it's all on me. And that's not the right type of discipline. The right type of discipline is staying disciplined to the process of when something comes up that causes me to sin, causes me to feel anxiety or feel anger or like go into this, this negative self. Am I willing to engage in the process to identify the root of that?
Mm-hmm.
Invite God into it to heal it, and be honest about it. Like this is in my life and it does need to be dealt with. I'm not just going to hide it or medicate it or avoid it or whatever. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense.
That's straight and narrow. Like we're just going to take it straight on. We're going to go look at it and we're going to confess I can't deal with it myself. Like I can't fix it myself. I need that help. So you're actually engaging in the process. That's the discipline, I would say, is to be willing to engage in the process that allows for healing. The best way to do that is to stay in community with other people who are wanting to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So you can encourage each other forward in it, because by myself, I always just want to like self-protect and go back into hiding or go back into my old patterns or whatever. Like it's just much easier, the wide way. It's just much easier to do it the way I've always done it, and not deal with it.
That's super fascinating. I feel like that process alone is something that we could get energy from. To bring it back to energy is like that process alone doesn't seem easy, but it should produce energy in and of itself.
Yeah. I mean, the simplest analogy is like when you're sick to your stomach and you just feel bad, and then you finally like barf and then you feel way better. Like immediately, it's like, it's just, you got rid of the thing that was in there that was poison,
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you feel way, way better. So
dude, that's so
gross.
to me, it's so uplifting. It was just that one, because we all can, relate to some degree and with all this stuff. So that's fascinating, man. Dude, thank you for coming on. Like this has been a blast. I can't believe we've been talking for an hour now, and I want to be respectful of your time, and we need to do this again. Can we get you back on?
Yeah, let's do it. There's obviously lots to explore with all of this stuff,
Real quick, Matt, can you kind of tell people where Identity is? Can you give us where they can find you on the internet, in all the different places? Where can people find Identity Exchange?
Sure. Well, I mean, I guess I'd say identityexchange.com is the best place for like our resources and training.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bunch of there's a bunch of free stuff on there in the media tab, just talks that Jamie has given and Jamie and Donna have done. And then there's courses and classes and groups and all this kind of stuff that people can plug into. We're working on rolling out a community, actually, like a membership community where people can just plug in and be around other people, like I was talking about, who are pursuing the same thing. That's coming. But yeah, identityexchange.com, best place to probably start. I know we've got some social media stuff too, but I'm not thinking of it right offhand. Identity Exchange on Instagram would be a good spot just for kind of updates on what's happening.
And the other thing too, guys, is we mentioned the intuitive mind. We will link in the description below, whether you're listening on an audio platform or on YouTube. We'll link the conversations we had with Jamie Winship on the intuitive and the rational mind. There's 2 parts to it. So you guys can dive into those now if you'd like. Matt, man, such a pleasure. Thank you so much. I feel like we should just record every single conversation we ever have.
Let's make that the plan. Yeah, sounds good.
All right, man. See you later.
All right. Thanks.
Don't go away.